ask everyone attending this meeting to mute yourself unless you are recognized to speak. Please note that the committee meetings of the RTD Board of Directors will be held remotely via Zoom and will be audio and video recorded. The meeting recordings, along with the unofficial minutes of the meetings, will be posted as soon as practicable on the board's website. During today's meeting, we are providing Communication Access Real-Time Translation, also known as CART. Anyone who would like to access this service should send an email to the RTD board office at rtd.boardoffice@rtd-denver.com, and a link will be provided. Additionally, the CART transcript can be automatically translated into Spanish for anyone who would like access to a live transcript of this meeting in Spanish. A live stream of this meeting is also available via RTD's YouTube page. I would now like to call the roll for the committee members. First, Committee Member Brendel, I'm here. Director Busick, I believe, was not able to attend today. Director Deschel.
Here.
Committee Member Ohlenberger. Do not see him.
Yeah, he's unable to attend.
All right, thank you. And Director Catlin.
Here.
Do we have any other directors present?
At this time, Vice Chair Brendel, I do not see any other directors present.
All right, thank you. I would like to open public comment to anyone who would like to address the committee regarding any topic listed in the published meeting agenda for the current and immediately preceding month. If you wish to speak and have not already done so, please raise your virtual hand or press *9 on your phone. During this time, the committee will not offer any direct comments or responses. However, if you would like to be contacted regarding your public comment, please email the RTD board at rtd.directors@rtd-denver.com. Are there any hands raised or public comments?
Vice Chair Brendel, this is Jack Kroll, Executive Manager of the Board Office. There is no one present who has raised their hand to indicate they wish to provide public comment, and no public comment was submitted in advance of this meeting via email. And as such, I believe you can consider the public comment section closed.
All right, thank you, Mr. Kroll. We will close the public comment period at this time. We'll now move to recommended actions. There's one recommended action on the agenda this afternoon for the 2024 Annual Comprehensive Financial Report and Report to Governance. And that is for the Board of Directors to accept into the records Regional Transportation District's Annual Comprehensive Financial Report that includes audited financial statements related to the year ended December 31st, 2024. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
I hear a motion from Director Catlin and second from Director Deschel. I would like to ask Kelly Mackey, Chief Financial Officer, and Brian Ayton, Senior Manager Accounting, to present this item.
Thank you so much. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Pam Hill at Plant Moran, who is going to present on the annual audit. Pam?
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us here this afternoon. So we're excited to cover the results for the 12/31/2024 fiscal year-end audit. Amy, I believe you are going to share the presentation. So this was included within your packet, but we'll pull it up here on screen and walk through the presentation with you all today. All right, I'll give you a minute, Amy.
Is it on?
It is, yeah.
Perfect.
Can everyone see that okay? Or is it's a little small, but I think it's okay. All right, if you want to go to the first slide, Amy. Perfect. So I guess first, before we get into all the details of the audit, we really did just want to say thank you to RTD staff. We did spend over 1,200 hours this year auditing the district's financial statements in compliance with federal regulations, as well as some of the other reports on screen right now. As you can imagine, that's a lot of hours, not only of our team, but your team as well, getting ready for us, and then assisting us with all our requests and questions as we work through the process. So we work with many, many different folks throughout the district, but we really want to just thank everyone for their cooperation and assistance during the audit, including Ms. Johnson, Ms. Mackey, Mr. Atten, Mr. Morgan, and Mr. McLeod, among many, many more. I know others on this call have been involved, as well as many different departments. Also really wanted to thank the audit committee and the board, as well as the internal audit team from Reuben Brown, for just the support and communication throughout the process. It really is a very important part of the audit process, your feedback and your communication. So we really thank you all for that as well. So you can see that we're actually hired to provide 5 different deliverables. The first 3 at the top today are the 3 we'll be covering in our presentation today. The first being our auditor's report on the financial statements. I'm happy to report a clean opinion or unmodified opinion. And so that's the highest level of assurance you can receive from your auditors, and basically means you can rely on the numbers as they are stated within the district's financial statements. We also have our required end of audit communication, which we'll walk through on these slides. Again, happy to report no findings here. And we also have our single audit report, or in other words, the federal compliance report. So we do test spending, the district's spending with federal compliance laws, mainly federal transit cluster is the program we're testing. And again, happy to report no findings on compliance or internal controls. You may recall we also perform at the board's discretion some procedures around the general manager's salary, ensuring that the payments for the year agree to her contract, which happy to report we did not have any exceptions there. We finished that work quite a few months ago now, back in February. And also we do additional procedures related to the National Transit Database, which is the district reports up to the FTA through this database. So we perform some procedures around the accuracy of those amounts that are reported to the FTA. And again, that work is due April 30th. And so we completed that work before the required timeline. I would like to say too, we did date the financial statements this year, May 27th. That's almost an entire month earlier than last year. So kudos to your team and ours for really pushing and working hard to ensure that we can get this done as timely as possible. So glad to see the progress there, and we'll continue to work at getting that done earlier and earlier every year. But I think the main takeaway, I guess, from my perspective on this slide is that there were no findings. So we did a whole bunch of work. Your team did a whole bunch of work, and really that means you have very strong internal controls in place at the district, and the numbers within the statements can be relied on. So we'll turn to the next slide. You may recall we presented to the audit committee prior to the start of the audit, and we talked about our required risk identification process. And so up on the screen were the identified potential areas of risk, and also what we did to perform additional tests around those items. And at the end of the day, happy to let you know that we did not have any findings as a result of these additional procedures. So again, we performed additional procedures, and we were very comfortable with the numbers after the additional procedures were performed. Did want to point out that, and you may recall, we had a conversation about this. It seems like this conversation happens every year because there's always a new GASB statement. I feel like next year, I think you have 2 new ones, so they don't go away. But the district did implement GASB 101, so you probably noticed that as you were looking through the district's financial statements this year. There was an immaterial impact to the financial statements related to GASB 101, but it did require restatement of beginning of the year net position. So because you have comparative statements, it was a little bit, I don't want to say a little bit, it was definitely more work as you had to recalculate it as of the beginning of the year of 2023, run it through 2023, calculate it at the end of 23, and then calculate at the end of 2024. So it had to get calculated essentially 3 times in order to restate the financial statements in accordance with the accounting standards. So again, kudos to your team for working through that and really being proactive in terms of getting in front of that calculation and the standard. And we were able to provide some toolkits and templates for your team to use as well as they went through the analysis. And then on the next slide, this is just, again, some of our additional responsibilities and communications under the auditing standards. So as you're aware, our responsibility, Plant Moran's, is to express an opinion on the financial statements. Again, which we stated was an unmodified opinion. Our planning, risk assessments, etc., was really performed over the 6-month period, December through May. And happy to report that there was no transactions that were entered into that there was a lack of guidance or consensus between us and the district. And then on the next slide, again, some required communications related to the significant accounting estimates. As you're all aware, the net pension liability, which we will cover those numbers in a little more detail in a few slides. Amy's going to cover those. We do have to audit the assumptions used in those accounting estimates and the reasonableness of those assumptions. So again, we perform additional procedures around that, as noted on a prior slide. Nothing really else to report, which I think I guess is a good thing. If we had any different disagreements or difficulties encountered during the audit, this is where we would note them and where we would have those discussions with you all. But happy to report nothing there. And then on the next slide, as a part of our audit process, we did have some more formal recommendations, not findings, but just best practices, things we're seeing in the marketplace, etc. We did discuss those with management and also with the chair of the board and the audit committee in our closing meeting. So we did discuss these in more detail, and we do have actually another upcoming meeting with management to kind of go through these in even more detail in the upcoming weeks here. So I wasn't planning on going through all of these in detail, but again, happy to if you've read through the letter and have specific questions on any of these items, we're happy to cover those. So if no questions, I am going to turn it over to Amy and let her cover. It wouldn't be an audit presentation without at least a few numbers, right? So we had to get a few numbers in there. So I'll let Amy cover the pension and a couple of the last graphs. Go ahead, Amy.
Thanks, Pam.
Yep.
So like Pam said, I'm going to talk to you all first a little bit about some long-term legacy costs of the district. So this slide here is essentially showing the funding progress specifically for the ATU pension plan. As you can see, the unfunded liability for this plan was about $141 million at the end of the fiscal year. So the one thing we did want to point out here is that these numbers are at a specific point in time and are actually on a 1-year lag. So for example, when you're looking at the 12/31/24 numbers shown here at the bottom, this is really reflecting activity as of 12/31/23, since the measurement date for the plan is a year behind. Another thing you may be noticing and asking yourself when looking at this graph is, gosh, between 2022 and 2023, what happens? The percent funded jumped over 15%. Well, you may recall early 2022, as part of the new CBA that year, which also closed the plan to new hires, there was a one-time 160 million contribution to the plan. So this is where the 1-year lag is that I just discussed is relevant, because due to that 1-year lag that we just discussed, this contribution wasn't reflected until that 2023 line. So you can see the plan net position increased significantly in 2023 to offset that total pension liability in that year. Overall, the percent funded has trended up over the last 5 years to being at about 76% funded at the end of fiscal year 24. This next slide is the exact same concept as the slide previous, but this one is for the salaried employees pension plan. So similar to the ATU plan, this plan is also on a 1-year lag in terms of the measurement date. So again, the 2024 fiscal year here shown at the bottom is really showing plan activity as of 2023. I say this because keep that in mind when you're looking at this chart, because you will see this dip in the funding percentage from 22 to 23. That's largely the result of the market being down in 2022. It just wasn't reflected until 2023 due to this 1-year lag. Overall, though, the funding percentage here has really been relatively consistent over the past 5 years. At year end, the unfunded liability for this plan was just under 60 million, with the percent funded hovering around 70%. So this last slide that I'm going to get into is really just a trend analysis for the past 5 years of the total expenditures of federal awards, which is essentially the total amount on your schedule of expenditures of federal awards for each year. So it's a mouthful. We call it a SEPA. This is a great visual, really just showing the spend down of the COVID-19 funding over the years 2020 through 2023. On top of the COVID-related funding, 2020 is, again, a little bit higher than the other years because of the Transportation Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act, or TIFIA program, which was about 340 million added on top of the other funding that year. But when you jump back to 2024, expenditures of federal awards were just under 39 million this year, and as Pam mentioned earlier, over 99% of this amount was related to the federal transit cluster, which comes from the U.S. Department of Transportation. So going forward, the district is likely to see expenditures of federal awards looking more closer to this 2024 level. And then that is all of the numbers that we had prepared for you today. Thank you for the opportunity to serve us. Pam, I'm sure you want to open it if there's any questions anybody has.
Sure, yeah, we're happy to take any questions through the chair if anyone has.
All right. Yes, so let's open for discussion. Does anyone have questions or comments? I do have one while we're waiting. I believe it's in the MD&A, talks about the increase in services expense. And it says a big part of the increase in 2024 is due to RTD acting as direct grant recipient for the East Colfax BRT project, with the city and county of Denver as the subrecipient. And I just wonder if you could help me understand the flow of funds and also how that inflows and outflows show up on the financial statements.
Yeah, so I guess I can start, and then I don't know if either Kelly or Byron want to jump in if I misspeak, but so my understanding is that, so the City County of Denver is spending the dollars. The grant was awarded to RTD, and the City County of Denver was a subrecipient. And so the City County of Denver submits their expenses to RTD. RTD reviews them, is responsible for the grant compliance related to that and ensuring that the subrecipient is appropriately spending the monies related to those grants. And then RTD ultimately submits those grant dollars for reimbursement and then flows that through to City of County of Denver. So the revenue and expense is grossed up within the district's financial statements.
So the revenues would be in that grant section, the chart that we just looked at?
Correct. And
Thank
we did test the subrecipient. There's a separate compliance requirement related to subrecipients that was a part of our testing and our sampling this year on the federal audit.
All right, great, thanks.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments? I see Director Catlin's hand raised.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I just wanted to say that, Pam, this was really good news in terms of the clean audit on all accounts. And I believe we ought to, we as a board should make sure that our legislative audit committee knows this as well. I think having, and maybe Kelly could respond to this, but I think having a really good clean audit is reflective of great management of RTD. So just to compliment you all on that. It was good news. Thank you.
Yes, I'm happy to add. Thank you so much, Dr. Catlin, for those words. I agree. And big thank you to Brendan Morgan and Byron Ayton for their work earlier in the year supporting Plant Moran. So big thank you.
Anything else? Okay, we'll call for a vote on the motion. Are there any no votes on this action? Hearing and seeing no no's, with 3 aye votes, no no votes, and no abstentions, the motion passes. We have one discussion item. Are the Pam and Amy from Plant Moran, are you staying, or are you? We're moving on to the internal audit. You're welcome to stay if you'd like, but I wanted to thank you for being here and appreciate the presentation and, of course, all the work that you did on the audit.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Have
so
a great
much.
day.
Thanks.
Thanks.
We'll move on to our discussion item on the agenda today, and that is an internal audit update. I'd like to ask Kelly Mackey, Chief Financial Officer, and Matt Marino, Chief Audit Executive from Reuben Brown, to present this item.
Thank you very much. So as you know, the internal audit function charter requires that the chief audit executive prepares and distributes written reports upon the conclusion of each internal audit engagement, at least quarterly. And the internal audit results must also be communicated to the audit committee at least quarterly. So this is the purpose of this meeting, is Matt will present those audit finding summary results to us and discuss any findings and recommendations. All significant findings remain in open issues until cleared, and he will continue to give us status updates on those follow-up items. And I'll turn it over to Matt.
Thank you, Kelly. It was a great presentation early from the Plant Moran. I think the internal audit plan will address some of the items that they highlighted as some emerging issues as well. So we'll talk about that. There is one internal audit that we'll go through in detail after I give you the internal audit update. But other than that, I'll kind of go through it from here, and we'll I muted myself. Sorry about that.
Hey, Matt, I
yeah.
hate to interrupt, and maybe this is just a me problem, but for whatever reason, your screen share is kind of blocking some of the presentation. Is that something that everyone else is seeing, or is it just me?
I see that.
Let me share it in a different way. Hold on one second.
Okay.
Is that better?
No.
Really?
I can try to share it from my end, see if that works.
You want to try?
Yeah.
I'll stop share.
Okay. How does that look?
That's weird. I can see it better. Not blocking on my end. Sorry about that. I'll
Looks
just say
good.
next slide, Kelly, when I'm ready to move
Yeah.
on. Always something in technology. Thank you, Kelly.
Sure.
So as I was mentioned earlier, so this internal audit plan will address some of the things that were highlighted as part of the external audit, but as a reminder, this internal audit plan was approved by you all as well as the board at the last time we met. So I'm going to update you on the audit process and of various different audits and kind of let you know what we're looking forward to. And then after that, I'll go through some highlights of the most recently issued audit. So the first one has to do with the IT vulnerability assessment using the new NIST CSF 2.0 framework. So we will talk about that during the next audit committee meeting. We were close to doing it during this audit committee meeting, but a couple of the parties that were integral to discussing that matter were unavailable. So we felt like it would be important for them to be available to go through those matters when we do that. But that is virtually done. Your team should be applauded for applying themselves to the 2.0 framework because it wasn't necessarily absolutely necessary. So we're kind of just giving them a status check on where that's at, and we'll report on that later. RTD Operation Service Development, that one has been drafted, and I'm working with the different parties to make sure that we aren't conflating issues. One thing that when we did actually issue the draft is we were mixing matters that don't necessarily shouldn't be mixed. They are contributing factors to service development, but they don't always lead to impacts on different modes of transportation. So we're working on cleaning that up a little bit. We are going to go through the rail operations corrective action plans audit here after I go through this update, and then we're regularly tracking the management action plans. And so I will talk about that here a little bit later. Overall challenges, issues on risks, really still having some delays in receiving responses and updates from responsible parties on management action plans. However, I would like to applaud Miss Kelly Mackey, since she has come on, has been very proactive about tracking those down, getting responses. So even the information that's in this slide deck is really out of date just because we've had to turn it in by a certain date. So we have some closure on several of the management action plans or updated targets. So thank you very much, Kelly, for helping us ferret those out and make sure we're pushing forward our management action plans. If you look there on the right, is kind of just a dashboard of, obviously green being whether it's on track, yellow if it's a little bit behind, and red if it's on major delays. So by and large, compared to where we started with the overall internal audit process, we're really staying mostly in the green and yellow. So really great job on that. I know it's a lot of work for all of the different departments to find time in their day jobs to let us help them find efficiencies and ways to improve operations. And sometimes that's not always the easiest, but we appreciate everybody working through that together. So we are just getting ready to issue our report, at least a draft report with regard to the P-card program review. So that one was done by our DBE, our disadvantaged business entity partner, Dietrich Partners. And so they have completed their audit, and they're working through any exceptions, and then we'll issue a draft and work through that with management once that is done. Staff schedule and extra shift review. I've talked about that. Sorry about that. Staff schedule and extra shift review. So we have been working with the chief people officer to refine our scope and our objective. We literally just had a kickoff meeting just a couple days about talking about when we should do that. I think we had about 20 different vested parties on the call to make sure that everybody's aware of what we're wanting to do. And so that'll be kicking off in full scope very quickly here. It's going to be a large audit. It's got a lot of different tentacles to it, so we will report back to you. And then we also met with the board office, and we also will be working with the finance team to kick off the board of directors expense reimbursement review audit as well. So those are the kind of in process audits at this point. Any questions so far? Not seeing any hands, so I'll go ahead and go. I guess Kelly will go forward. So this is really just a rehash of kind of what I've talked about on the prior slide, but more of a comprehensive look on what we have coming up for like really the next next 12 months from here. So as you can see, we have several things that are in the in process phase, a couple things in the complete phase, and then several things in planning, which we've already talked about. And then coming up are various different audits, whether it be contracted services for the information technology group, parts inventory, federal, state, local regulations oversight, transit police for Q4 of 25, capital asset management. So really, I think what we have is a great plan, and we've been moving things around to the extent that we need to address risk as they come up, or not double audit parts of the organization that are already being audited by other entities, so that we can piggyback off the work that was done by other entities to not duplicate efforts. So that's really where we're at on that. Really no substantial changes I need to report to you as far as like we moved something up a ton or pushed it back. We really took the feedback we got from you in March, and we've been running with that plan so far. Next slide, please. Apologize, trying to get over some allergies. So this is the slide deck, part of the slide deck where we talk about the MAPs, or the management action plans tracking. So as I mentioned earlier, this was you'll see the project name, the observation number, the observation title, and target date and risk rating. So you'll see if it's either complete, if it has a target date with a asterisk next to it, that could be that we're still waiting on updates from responsible parties, or if there's a strike through or a crosshash through the date, it's a revised target date. Many of these we've already gotten updates on. One I do want to highlight is the employee training program. I did talk with the chief people officer, and there'll be news upcoming very shortly on the full implementation of the management action plan. But we've seen the documentation. They have it under control, and it's just really a matter of notifying all responsible parties and making sure all of the different parts of the organization are aware of the plan with regard to that. But it's sometimes it just takes time to get notifications out, but I did have a great conversation with the chief people officer regarding that. So I did want to point that out, as well as several of the ITGC things are also in process. Some of it has to do with updating policies and procedures, and so that just takes time as well. So if we go to the next slide. Safety, there's most of these target dates are out in the future, so nothing necessarily from that's necessarily behind. There's a couple that are coming up here soon for follow-up, and we will do that. And so we'll work with the safety team to make sure that we get responses. And as I mentioned earlier, Kelly has been great to reach out to the groups, because it's we reach out every 2 weeks to get updates, but it's always nice to have the full team approach to making sure we're all getting updates on what we need to be doing as an organization to further and improve operations of the district. So next slide. A couple more from safety, nothing necessarily to report on that. And then a couple that we need to verify complete by looking. So we do take a verbal or a email verification that it has been completed, but then we usually do obtain some sort of substantiation that whatever the management action plan was, did it indeed, was it implemented? And so that's where that's at. Next slide. Okay, keep going. Any questions on the internal audit update so far? Okay. If we keep going forward into the next audit.
I can see slide 10 on mine, the final slide.
Yeah, is the internal audit not in there? Because it was not in the board packet.
Can you speak to it?
I can speak to it. I'll just speak to it. I have it in front of me, so I'll just speak to it. Okay, so the internal audit that was in the board packet is the rail operations corrective action plans review. So for those of you who aren't in RTD all day, every day, we receive corrective action. Well, we receive findings from different organizations, primarily the Public Utilities Commission, the CPUC, or the Federal Transit Administration. And as part of that, when they have findings, we have to draft corrective action plans. And so what we did as part of this audit process is we reviewed how we are implementing those corrective action plans, how are we monitoring them, how are we following up, and so on. And so we did have several findings that we did have as a part of the audit process. So overall, we had 5 total findings that we're reporting to you, 1 that was related as a high risk rating, and 4 that were moderate. The overall audit received a needs improvement audit rating. Really, when we look at it, there were several different things that need to happen with regard to the corrective action plans. Number 1, the first being is that there are specific elements of the corrective action plans that should be followed up on and spelled out in our standard operating procedures. So the first one has to do with the light rail standard operating procedure. And then we're recommending that the corrective action plan process include requirements of the filing date, the emergency corrective action, and dispute resolution to ensure that are processed in accordance with the regulation. So when we looked at the regulation that talks about the corrective action plans with regard to light rail, we felt that there were missing elements of that. And so management concurred with that, and they're in the process of implementing a quality oversight division. And as part of that, they're recruiting a manager to help with the oversight of that process.
Hey, Matt, I'm just going to jump in real quick. I was able to pull up the packet here. And so I'm going to share my screen real quick on the executive summary page where you're going over this audit, just so everyone can follow along.
Thank you. And I'm on observation 2 now, Jack, if you want to just jump straight there.
Sorry, everybody. I asked, can you all see this? And is this at a level where it's visible and helpful?
Yes, I can see it.
And now you said you're on observation 2?
Correct.
And does this
So
match? Okay, I assume I'm in the
this
right spot.
this matches exactly what I was expecting to see. So observation 2 talks about the corrective action plan process. So as part of the process, we did look at a sample of 10 different corrective action plans, and we noted a couple different things. We noted that some of them did not have, of the 10 that were selected, several were not assigned with the risk assessment codes according to our safety system program plan, and the determines the mitigation efforts and to eliminate it. 6 corrective action plans did not have evidence of review and approval by the commuter rails deputy assistant general manager, and 3 corrective action plans for the between the date range of 2022 and 2024 did not have evidence of a start date, as well as discussions of the mitigation activities. And then 2 of the corrective action plans did not, they had it in progress status as of March 2025, and there was no discussion to ensure the mitigations were fully implemented. So really what we're looking for on that one is to improve the follow-up and make sure that we're closing out the findings, and also making sure that there's adequate review of the status on those corrective action plans. Next one. The next one has to do with the investigation of the root cause analysis. So when we looked at the corrective action plans, we did not feel confident that the root cause analysis documentation was always there with regard to corrective action plans. So when we develop a corrective action plan, it's there to fix some sort of identified problem that was identified by a regulator or some other matter. And so important to that is the root cause analysis of the actual matter. And so that was not consistently documented in the documentation with regard to the corrective action plan. So we're recommending that that be done. That is something also that will be handled by that rail operations quality the quality oversight position that will be hired as part of the expansion of that department that I discussed earlier. And observation 4 is the next one. Corrective action plan implementation verification. So we noted a couple different instances where the corrective action plans weren't clearly evidence that the implementation was fully verified, and so we're recommending that be fully verified, and that quality oversight division will also help with that process as well. So really, the department was extremely helpful. This audit actually went pretty fast overall, and really, honestly, the department was already on the journey of expanding the quality oversight division, and so it's just a matter of fully expanding that process and getting that position filled. Any questions on the corrective action plan audit?
I have one.
Yes.
We looked at a sample of 10. Do you know
Yes.
how many, what is the population that we're looking at in a year? Do you know?
It's not necessarily a year. That was a couple year period. I can get back to you on
Okay.
the specific of that,
Yeah,
but
I'm just curious, are we
yeah.
looking at 10 out of 20 or 10 out of 100?
No, it's not 10 out of 20. It's not quite that high of a rate. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? Okay. So I believe that would conclude my part of the audit process. As mentioned earlier, there'll be several different audits that we will be reporting on. I think we're slated for July for the next meeting, and so I'll be bringing at least 2 audits to you, hopefully, possibly 3. And so that'll be, while this one was a little heavily weighted with external financial reporting, we'll get back to some more heavily weighted towards our internal audit, heavily focus on the audit committee. So.
All right, thank you. Are there any other comments or questions from the committee on this item? If not, are there any other matters to discuss today? Hearing none, the next audit committee meeting is currently scheduled for Thursday, July 10th. And at that meeting, we will continue to review results of audits from our approved audit plan. And I anticipate that we will have an executive session at that meeting to discuss certain cybersecurity sensitive related audit findings. And if there are no other matters, the meeting is adjourned at 2:43 p.m. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.